Happening right now, the trade war between the United States and Canada just went nuclear. The White House has doubled tariffs on steel and aluminum, pushing them to a stunning 50%. That means every ton of steel or aluminum crossing the border now costs half as much again in taxes before it even reaches a factory floor. This isn't just a number on paper. It's a shockwave hitting everything from cars to construction to canned goods. And the ripple effects are already showing. Factories slowing down, store shelves getting more expensive, and politicians in both countries sounding the alarm. In Canada, the anger is boiling over. The Premier of Ontario is threatening to land every piece we've got, which some are interpreting as a warning that Canada might even cut electricity exports to the United States. If that happens, power costs in northern states like Michigan and New York could explode overnight. So how did we get here? And what happens next? Let's break it down step by step, starting with what a 50% tariff really means and why it matters for both countries. Let's take a moment to break down how tariffs actually work. Basically, a tariff is a tax that a government places on goods imported from other countries. The idea is to make imported products more expensive, which in theory encourages people to buy locally made goods instead. But tariffs can have a lot of different effects on prices, businesses, and even consumers like you and me. So what exactly does a 50% tariff mean in real life? Well, let's talk through a simple example to make it a bit clearer. Think of it like this. Imagine you run a factory that buys steel from Canada for $1,000 a ton. Under normal conditions, you pay $1,000 and move on. But with a 50% tariff, the U.S. government adds a $500 tax on top of that price. Suddenly, your $1,000 steel now costs $1,500, before you even start shaping it into car doors or bridge beams. And that extra $500 doesn't come from nowhere. The factory has two choices: swallow the cost and make less profit, or pass it on to the next buyer. That means the cost keeps getting pushed along the supply chain, from factories to wholesalers to retailers, until it finally reaches the consumer. By the time it gets to store shelves, that hidden tax shows up as higher prices on cars, appliances, even canned soup. Steel and aluminum are everywhere. They're the skeleton of the economy. Automakers use them to build vehicles, construction firms use them for bridges and skyscrapers. And even your soda can is made of aluminum. When tariffs hit these materials, it's like raising the price of flour and expecting bread to stay cheap. This is why the impact of a 50% tariff isn't limited to just Canada or a few factories. It touches nearly every major industry in North America, and the first signs of stress are already visible. The shockwaves from this tariff hike were almost instant. Within hours of the announcement, markets started sliding. Stocks for major manufacturers, automakers, and construction suppliers all dropped. America's biggest retailers, Walmart included, warned that prices would rise, with President Trump famously telling them to, eat the cost. But eating the cost isn't so simple. For many companies, these tariffs wipe out profit margins overnight. Automakers, for example, depend on Canadian steel to build millions of vehicles every year. A 50% spike in material costs can add hundreds of dollars to the price of each car rolling off the line. That's money customers eventually pay. And it's not just about balance sheets. It's about jobs. Factory owners who can't afford these costs start slowing production, delaying orders, or laying off workers. In some towns, one factory closure can be the difference between a thriving local economy and a row of empty Main Street shops. Even outside the factory floor, people are feeling it. The Ontario government's retaliatory surcharge on electricity exports is already adding an estimated $100 a month to the bills of 1.5 million homes in Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. That's not just an economic number. That's a family sitting at the kitchen table deciding whether to turn off the lights earlier at night. This is the human face of a trade war, and Canada isn't just sitting back. The next question is, how is Canada fighting back? Canada has made it very clear, if Washington escalates, Ottawa will respond. And this time, the response isn't just coming from the federal government. At the national level, Canada has already rolled out about $30 billion in retaliatory tariffs targeting U.S. goods, everything from steel products to ketchup to whiskey. The idea is simple: hit politically sensitive industries and make American lawmakers feel pressure at home. But Ontario, Canada's manufacturing powerhouse, has taken things much further. Premier Doug Ford has slapped a 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the United States, hitting 1.5 million homes and businesses across Michigan, New York, and Minnesota. He's also announced that Ontario will use the extra revenue to lower power bills for Ontarians, turning U.S. pain into a local political win. And that's not all. Ontario has banned U.S. companies from competing for provincial government contracts and pulled American-made liquor off LCBO shelves. These may sound symbolic, but, they send a message. Ontario is ready to use every lever it has to put pressure on Washington. This kind of multi-layered retaliation, federal tariffs plus provincial measures, is something we haven't seen before in North America. And it raises a bigger question. Could Ontario really go as far as shutting down power exports altogether? The plausibility of Ontario actually cutting off power exports is, a huge topic. It would be a dramatic move, one with serious consequences for both sides of the border. But as tensions rise, it's a scenario that, honestly, some people are starting to take seriously. When Premier Doug Ford says Ontario will land every piece we've got, some people picture northern U.S. states going dark overnight. But is that even possible? When Premier Doug Ford says Ontario will land every piece we've got, some people picture northern U.S. states going dark overnight. But is that even possible? Technically, Ontario and Quebec do have leverage. They supply a big share of electricity to states like Michigan, New York, and Minnesota, especially during peak demand. Cutting that supply wouldn't shut the lights off everywhere, but it could force U.S. utilities to scramble for more expensive backup power. That means higher prices, potential shortages, and even rolling blackouts in the worst-case scenario. But here's the catch. Ontario also makes money from these exports. Cutting them off entirely would hurt Ontario's own revenues. That's why most analysts think a full shutdown is unlikely. Instead, what we're seeing now, raising prices, adding surcharges, using electricity as a bargaining chip, is probably the more realistic scenario. Think of it like turning a dimmer switch, not flipping the light completely off. By gradually increasing costs, Ontario keeps the pressure on U.S. governors and businesses to lobby Washington for relief, without taking a huge hit to its own economy. This is smart politics, but it's also risky. If the U.S. decides to retaliate even harder, things could spiral quickly, and that's where Canada's internal politics start to matter. The fallout from the trade dispute is not just felt at the border, but is rippling through communities across Canada, affecting businesses, workers, and families in ways that, honestly, few could have predicted. Canada's response to Trump's tariffs isn't just a fight between two countries. It's also becoming a fight inside Canada itself. The federal government in Ottawa has tried to take a measured approach, hoping to keep channels open with Washington and avoid a full-scale trade war. But Ontario, where much of Canada's manufacturing is based, is losing patience. Premier Doug Ford's government is under pressure from factory workers, unions, and local business owners who are seeing orders dry up and costs rise. So this tension is creating two very different voices coming out of Canada. Ottawa is saying, let's stay calm and negotiate, while Ontario is saying, enough is enough. Hit back harder. On the surface, this might look like a split that weakens Canada's position, but, some analysts argue it could actually make Canada more unpredictable, and therefore harder for Washington to ignore. Inside Canada, this has also become a political flashpoint. Provinces like Quebec are watching closely because they too export electricity to the United States and have large manufacturing sectors. If Ontario succeeds in winning concessions, other provinces might join in with their own measures, turning a provincial fight into, a nationwide economic strategy. This internal tug-of-war is shaping how far Canada is willing to go. And it's why the next stage of this story is about more than just tariffs. Canada is now thinking long-term about how to stop relying so heavily on the United States market. So when it comes to strategic countermeasures, it's really about thinking several steps ahead. Rather than just responding to what's happening right now, leaders need to anticipate challenges and put plans in place that will safeguard the country's interests over the long term. Canada's leaders know that, honestly, just reacting to each new tariff isn't a winning strategy. That's why some of the country's most influential voices, including former Bank of Canada Governor Mark Carney, are calling for a long-term reset of the Canadian economy. The goal is simple: reduce Canada's dependence on the U.S. market so that, future tariffs don't hit as hard. To get there, Canada is investing heavily in projects that open up new trade routes and strengthen its own supply chains. This means expanding ports to ship goods directly to Europe and Asia, building new rail links to move products faster across the country, and pouring money into digital infrastructure and green energy. Think of this as Canada's Plan B, a way to make sure its economy can thrive even if relations with Washington stay rocky. If Canadian steel can move straight to Europe, or Canadian oil sands products can reach Asian refineries without relying on United States pipelines, Ottawa gains a lot more freedom to negotiate. These projects aren't just economic, they're political. They signal to Washington that Canada is serious about finding alternatives and won't always be the junior partner in the relationship. And the provinces are fully on board, especially Ontario, which sees this as a chance to attract foreign investment and rebuild its manufacturing sector on its own terms. All of this sets the stage for the big question: where does this leave the United States-Canada relationship, and what happens if this trade war keeps escalating? As we reach the end of our journey, it's clear that understanding these economic and political shifts is more important than ever. So I encourage you to stay informed, ask questions, and engage with your community. Together, we can shape a future that benefits everyone. Thank you for joining me, and, until next time, keep exploring and learning. At this point, both sides are locked in a high-stakes standoff. The United States is betting that tariffs will bring manufacturing jobs home. Canada is betting that it can hold out, retaliate, and force Washington to back down. There are a few ways this could play out. The first is de-escalation. Both sides agree to scale back tariffs and return to a more normal trade relationship. That would calm markets and restore some predictability. The second is a drawn-out trade war, where tariffs and counter-tariffs keep piling up, hurting workers and businesses on both sides of the border. And the third possibility? A slow but steady decoupling, where Canada finds new global customers and the United States is forced to pay more for key resources like steel, aluminum, and even electricity. No matter which path we take, one thing is clear. The days of smooth, friction-free trade between the United States and Canada may be over. The Premier of Ontario has made it clear that his province won't just sit back. And with projects from Mark Carney and others already in motion, Canada is preparing for a future where it no longer relies so heavily on its southern neighbor. So what do you think? Will Canada really pull the plug on United States electricity? Or is this just tough talk to get Washington back to the table? Are these tariffs protecting American jobs, or just raising prices for everyone? Let us know in the comments. And if you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share, because we'll be following this story closely as it develops.